Welcome to another Inspirational People episode of the Share Life podcast. Today I'm here with Nathan Dohse, president at AGD Entertainment, an organization dedicated to educating, inspiring, and supporting musicians in their creative and professional vocation with coaching, training, and advocacy. Nathan and I originally met in our respective hometown of Flagstaff, Arizona. As Providence would have it, we both ended up on the East Coast, with me in Atlanta, Georgia, and him in Nashville, Tennessee. Nathan is a former musician in a former band with his brother and now co-founder of AGD, and actually a past client of mine from many, many years ago, 15 or 16 years ago when I first moved here. We both moved across the nation and transitioned from multiple entrepreneurial pathways, staying connected over the years along the way. In this conversation, we'll explore different facets of your musical and entrepreneurial journey. But before we do that, let's jump into your history. Nathan, tell us about you, what you do, and your unfolding story.
Yeah, I think a lot of my story ends in music. My mom was a musician, piano player, and songwriter, and did worship music in our church. And I remember my older brother, Tim, who's a part of our company too, he played the piano. My oldest brother played the drums, and my dad played the drums. And so then I didn't want to be like... So it was a family affair. Yeah. And my older brother, Chris, started trying to learn the guitar. And I said, I get to learn the guitar. You don't get to learn the guitar. You got drums. And it was, and this wasn't like this was very serious for me. I felt it was very important to me that I had one that was mine. And I didn't think I could learn drums. I thought drums were his, piano was Tim's. So I get guitar. And my mom was good. And he was like, fine, man, that's cool.
I'm not married to this.
You're overreacting, but okay, at 8 or 9 years old, however old we were.
And what was the draw to music for all of you because of your parents, or do you
it was baked in? Was we were homeschooled, so we had music hour where we got to learn and practice music, and and I think I spent probably a bit more time. Tim spent a lot of time too, but I think I spent a bit more time in my alone time and in my time doing the instrument, or at least beginning to songwrite. And the funny thing was, I would take guitar lessons after my mom had kind of surpassed what she could teach me. And I'd take guitar lessons, and the guitar teacher would say, "Hey, did you learn what I taught you last week?" And I'd say, "No, but I wrote this new song using a little bit of what you taught me." And he's like, "Yeah, you didn't really learn it though." I'm like, "Yeah, but I wrote the song." And so then it became pretty clear that I was more of a songwriter than an instrumentalist. And so then starting bands and writing songs, and by the time I got through to high school, I remember doing college prep English and really, really upsetting my teacher, because we wrote an essay on what we were most excited about for college, and I wrote an essay on how I wasn't going to college because I was going to tour in a rock band. And it was a really good essay.
Yeah.
So he didn't know what to do, because he was like, "Well, I can't dock your grade."
Yeah.
So that was a lot of my experience. It's just like not just really trying to own my own space and do things my own way. And I had parents that really supported that. Like, they didn't even bat an eye at me not going to college, being a rock band, and that's the path. And then Tim, played bass in the band, and he was a couple years ahead of me. So as soon as he graduated college, he went to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, and as soon as he graduated college, we just went on tour. So I got my education on the road and learning about how to run a band, which is a business. And so I learned how to run a business and market a business. And so by the time I got to Nashville,
so is there a connection between your writing and the strategic aspect of that? Do you tend to be more strategic, or are those?
I'm definitely more strategic. I really didn't learn how to be a very good songwriter towards the very tail end of our career. Like I mimic a lot. Like I can see somebody do something and I can mimic it. I can do it. I go, oh, especially in creative spaces. Like if I watch over somebody's shoulder, them doing Photoshop, I can like pull up Photoshop and pretty much figure it out. Which is a blessing and a curse, because what it really does is it's that whole thing of jack of all trades, master of none, because I'm just mimicking a lot and not really developing the skill set. And so where I've really developed my skill set is in strategy post. The band was all about how can we do this and get some attention and get people to pay attention to us. Now, for us, we were in a touring rock band from 2007 to 2012 were our highest active years. And if you know anything about the music industry, that's when we were transitioning from
Well, I remember one time we met in Atlanta during that time.
Yeah.
And you were on I can't remember what it was, but it was like, hey, we're going to do 200 shows in the next 9 months. It was something like that. Yeah.
Yep. We were doing between 200 and 250 shows a year. And one of those tours, gas prices on the West Coast were $6 a gallon,
Yeah.
So it was a tough time to be a touring act. And we had some iron will, and we had to get really, really disciplined in what we were doing. So by the time
and did that discipline, was that something you brought to the table, or did that come from outside of you? Or was it?
No, I brought that to the table.
Yeah.
I mean, that is my ethos, right? Like that is what drives me is ride or die. I have no problem just laying it all on the table and
does that become an Achilles heel at times?
Of course. When no one else wants to do that, when you're like,
Nathan, we're all dead. You're just dragging us along the ground. Let us go.
Right. When it's like ride or die, guys. Yeah, we're done writing. Death is the last option. But actually, funny enough, the death of it, the letting things go. I remember when we finally, when I finally opted to move past the band, one of my guitar players had quit and was going to do media, and is now doing great in media, doing amazing work for music videos and stuff here in Nashville. And I remember he said to me, he goes, "You have to keep going because I know you're going to make it."
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I've toured the entire country. I've put out 5 studio albums. I've played pretty much every music festival to some extent. When do you make it again? Like, I'm still paycheck to paycheck or royalty check to royalty check. But when do you make it? And I remember him saying, "You have to keep going." And it was kind of like you can't tell me what to do. Like I can quit.
I'm gonna quit now.
Yeah. And so the quitting, really, and then I spoke with a couple of other musicians who had transitioned out and they were like, it's really, you've done it all. You've done it all. None of it hit the levels of success maybe you were hoping for, but there's no experience that you're gonna have that's gonna really light you up in a way that's like, because you just might not have that breakthrough where you're playing to 20,000 people. That just might not be in the cards for you. So it might be 250 people to 500 people a night for your shows. That might continue to be a grind, but you could keep going and there's no problem with that. But you might have hit a ceiling barring a viral moment or whatever. So you need to be okay with where you are. And like, this is making it, and this might be as far as you go. and you need to be okay with that if you're
Yeah.
going to keep going. And I was like, yeah, I am okay with that. And I'm also okay with, being done
Yeah.
and finishing that time of my life. So I don't think of it as quitting. Maybe that's just some wordplay for
Yeah.
me, but I really think of it as finishing. I did majority of the things that I set out to do. Some
What
of
was it, a
them,
formal finishing? Like you
no.
decided to end, or did it just kind
Oh
of fade
yeah.
away? Okay.
Well, both, because I had members of the band leaving, and I was forced to try and find replacements, and that's where I just decided not
Yeah.
to, you know.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, it's interesting
decided to move
because,
on.
I had my marketing company for from 2007 to 2014, and I did end it in
Yeah.
2014 in the spring. And I one of the things that was part of that was that I was doing at the end of it, and that I realized in retrospect, was that I was learning to finish something well. What does it mean to
Yeah.
finish well?
Yeah.
And in retrospect, one of the things that I also had to reconcile was exactly what you're saying. Like, is this the thing that I'm willing to give it to at what it is now?
Yep.
And if if I'm going to give all of something, right? If I'm going to ride or die, is this
Yep.
the thing I want to ride or die for, or is it
Right.
not? And I couldn't say yes enthusiastically,
Yeah.
and I realized
Yep.
maybe this isn't it. I don't know if
Yeah.
that
And
relates.
and no, it does totally. And if you look at realistically where you're headed, and
Mhm.
you stop lying to yourself, you stop lying to other people, and you gain some self-awareness, um, around some things, and look at your life realistically, and you say, okay, barring something really special outside of my control happening, this is probably realistically where this is headed. And am I okay with that? And do I want that to be my life? And asking those self-awareness questions honestly and answering them honestly is so important, so that you can move on to the next thing with a good disposition. The only thing that I regret in any of it is there were a couple fumbles in the transition, a couple of things that I did, trying to figure some other stuff out, and the legacy, if you can call it that, the legacy of the group, is a little bit scattered.
Mhm.
um, some of the content was taken down, some of the recordings were taken down to try and facilitate some other opportunities. And so there is this kind of nagging thing in the back of my head, and Tim and I talk about it, and some of the other musicians and some of the other members who had participated, we text about it, of like cleaning that up, right?
Yeah.
Not for anything other than just for it to be there.
Yeah. Well,
Especially now that we have kids and stuff, it's like,
yeah,
oh, it'd be nice
that
if it was
idea,
there.
yeah, the
Right.
finishing part, it's
Yeah.
interesting because the thing that comes to my mind is when I shut down my company, there was a lot of closure that came through that process. And one of the things that I had done when I first moved here is I actually I wanted to make a movie, a short film,
Yeah. I remember that.
and I filmed a bunch of it, and it was called Escape, but I never finished it. I didn't get all the footage I needed. And so when I was in this kind of finishing season, I thought, you know what? I can't finish the movie, but I can build a trailer. I have enough to build a trailer. And so I built this trailer and I pulled it together. And it wasn't for anyone else. It was just for me
Yeah.
to close that door and finish what I had started at the level that I
Yeah.
could. And that was very
Yeah.
powerful for me.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, especially if you're able to put the framework around it of what that means. And I think for, in the spirit of talking about entrepreneurship and starting and finishing, I hear this a lot from aspiring entrepreneurs or successful
Yeah.
entrepreneurs who say, I'm really just a starter. I'm not really a finisher. I'm great at starting things. So I surround myself with people who finish well. And I go, yeah, man, that's everyone. Like, no one's good at finishing things. Like, finishing things is hard.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that you are like, when you say I surround myself with finishers, it's saying I want them to do the hard part, and I'm gonna try and just have the fun of starting things. And so maybe you get to the point as an entrepreneur where you've earned that, and that's great.
Yeah.
But I started to find myself falling into that mindset. Oh, I'm a great
Oh,
starter. I have
okay.
tons
Yeah.
of ideas. I'm strategic. I can lay out a strategy plan, and somebody else can go and finish them. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of coming back to this place where I'm like, no, like I have to finish these things, and I need to finish them well, because no one else, it's the same ride or die. And like, I'm asking people to go lay down, for the finish when I'm on to the next thing. And I'm having those learnings big
Yeah.
again right now in my life of like, no, it's hard for everyone to finish.
Mhm.
Everything's hard to like it's
Yeah.
easy to start things. It's exciting and fun to start things.
Yep.
Finishing things is hard. So I think being able to say this is done, putting a bow on it,
Yeah.
and saying this is done is great,
Yeah.
and especially if it's not everything you dreamed that it would be,
Yeah.
especially if it's not everything you hoped it would be. That's maybe even more important,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Anyways.
So tell us how we transitioned from Nathan, the band guitarist, to
Yeah.
Nathan, the AGD co-founder.
Well, my life, I had a producer tell me that I had a lot of anchors when I was 21 years old. And my first marriage, I was married at 19 to 26, I think. And so I didn't understand what he meant when he said that I had anchors, but I was married young. I had a big family unit in Flagstaff. So everything was anchored to Flagstaff, which
Mhm.
Flagstaff's a beautiful town, as you know, and that wasn't so
Mhm.
bad until what I wanted to do just couldn't be facilitated there. But all of my
Yeah.
anchors were never going to leave, right? And so for me, moving to Nashville or LA or New York was out of the question. I could visit when we were on tour. I could do some business trips and things like that, some writing. I would come out to Nashville and write with people and then go back to Arizona. That's not what most people do. Most people move to Nashville as soon as possible, right?
Oh, okay.
And they don't have any anchors. So artists,
Yeah.
aspiring artists, they go, if I can make it to Nashville, I'm set. So by the time I got to Nashville, I'm a little older. I'm 20, 27, 28. I have no anchors at that time. I'm, really, and I'm all music career at this time. I'm like, this is it. Like nothing's going to distract me from my music career. But Nashville's hard to break in, and it was harder than I thought. And our successes outside of Nashville were it was easier to find success outside of Nashville than it was in Nashville. But we did everything well. We rose to the challenge and got a name for ourselves in Nashville very quickly. But I realized, we don't do this the way that other people do this. So we made a name for ourselves, and I started getting asked, hey, how do you tour?
Mhm.
Right. And I'm like, well, you're
Yeah.
a well-known artist in Nashville. You've got to know how to tour.
They
Nope.
didn't know.
They moved to Nashville. A songwriter, like, hey, how do you get, how are you making royalties from your music? Like, you don't know about managing your own publishing and like copyright and stuff? Like, nope. I moved to Nashville. And I'm like, but you're making money. Yeah, I have like somebody does that for me, right? Like, or whatever. And they didn't know. And so that's the light bulb moment of,
Yeah.
all of my time working out of Flagstaff, Arizona, where I had no support from music industry professionals at all.
Yeah.
I think one of your questions is about mentorship. I had really very little mentorship, but I had the internet.
Yeah.
Right. And so I learned everything myself, and just realizing in like the 2013, 2014 era, artists still, it was like, if I can move to Nashville, maybe something will happen for me.
So was there,
And so
so you had this blueprint that you could share with them.
Right.
But because of the way they go about it, did they have the drive to deliver, to execute on the blueprint, or is that something you had to help them develop that grit?
Yes, and okay, so both at times. So sometimes the drive ends with move to Nashville and hope I get lucky. But let's be honest, moving to Nashville is a big leap, right?
Yeah.
So now you've got artists who are really committed. They're so committed that they're going to move to Nashville, and now all they need is guidance.
Yeah.
And they're not getting it because the music industry is in total flux, where they're like, okay, do we just wait for people to get lucky on a playlist? And how is that all working? And that's continued on now into now, where it's okay, just, I don't know, break on TikTok. So they don't, so they have all the drive in the world, a lot of them, but they don't have any guidance.
Got it.
And so
and would you even say that they have a lot of bad guidance out there?
Yeah.
Or
well,
unhelpful or misdirected?
Yes, majority of it comes from cynicism.
Okay.
So you've got a lot of like leaders, like if you think about music and if you think about music education, who's the person that you learn most from is from your guitar teacher or from, somebody that maybe washed out.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, I'm grateful and feeling, I feel grateful for my ability to not be cynical.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you look at me, you could say like, oh, that guy washed out. But that whole conversation that we had about finishing, that makes me not feel, I feel like I chose this, right?
It's almost like the people that are cynical, the people that are cynical haven't closed out that part of their story.
They got to go back and do that closing, right?
Yeah.
And say, I chose to be here.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't go that way for them and they can't find that self-awareness, now they're cynical. Yeah. And then they're teaching the next generation of musicians cynicism from day one. Right.
But like, I would say it is a hard pill to swallow to accept reality, especially when it's not the reality you want. Right. So how do you lubricate that pill?
Yeah. And, from the begining, managing expectations from the beginning, somebody, so these young instrumentalists are being told by their guitar teachers, their drum teachers, and people like this that the music industry is full of, false promises and bad opportunities, and they're just getting bad advice from the very beginning. So trying to catch that early on and just
so what is it? I mean, why not go work for someone? Why did you start a company? Like you're starting over in a sense.
That's a great question.
So what's the opportunity? What's the value there that you saw that like, wow, this is an oil field that I need to tap into?
Well, I don't think it's even that. I don't think it's even with that kind of clarity. I just don't know anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm an entrepreneur. I got to do it. I got to do something. Employment isn't even an option.
I will be honest. I don't think I've ever said this. I never even considered trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Even considered it. The only thing, it was music. And then it was like, I could start this company.
Yeah. So in my mind, you're fully committed to entrepreneurship. There is no looking back.
By accident, like to my own chagrin at times. But I mean, that tracks back to, going to history and stuff. That tracks back to even in Flagstaff, like you'll remember like Club 111, right? Like you remember that
was in downtown, right? The one on
like a little venue, right? Like it was in a dance hall. It was like a ballet studio. Me and my friends in high school, we threw the first show in there. Right, like we rented it from the bar, like and I was like, well, we could rent a PA and we could charge $5 at the door and we could just do this ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was like, and then it went on Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, like turned into this real thing.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, but we did the first thing. That's just been baked into me from the beginning. I just look for
Yeah.
holes and
Okay.
go,
So
well, we can just
where
do
does
that.
so you co-founded it with your brother. So how does he come into the
Yeah.
picture, and how does the company take shape?
The education is smart. He's been our CFO, and now we changed some titles or whatever, but vice president and secretary. So he's got the business acumen.
Okay.
He's got he's got an MBA from ASU. So he left the band a few years early, while I was still cranking, and he went back to school and got his MBA, and he works in healthcare full time now, crushing it, still in Flagstaff, doing great development work in healthcare systems. And so I think it was over a bottle of scotch one Christmas, we're sitting there and I said, hey, I have this idea for a company. And one really important thing especially for other entrepreneurs that he said, and I'm going to credit him with the quote. He might have gotten it from somebody else. I don't know. But he said, are we building a company or are we starting you a job? And I said, well, both, I guess. I need a job. So you tell me. But that really, from the beginning, we really structured it in a way that it was like this. We didn't want it built on me or my experience. It wasn't like, let me teach you everything that I know.
Got it.
We wanted a brand that could be trusted for what the brand was, so that other people could participate and operate within it. So that's why we named our artist development program 0 to 60 by AGD. So it was by our company, not by me, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't
something beyond
Nathan,
you.
something beyond me. And we wanted it to, and then the whole time has been improving and increasing processes so that other people could execute.
Yeah.
So that it can be a self-sustaining product. So he had that clarity. I didn't have that clarity. I said, I want to work with other artists and help them do what we do. So my intentions and stuff were to help artists, and still are.
Yeah.
He had the clarity of like, well, if it's just a job for you, then he's like, I'll help you, but we don't need to start a company.
Yeah.
I'll just help you get going.
Yeah. Now a lot of
but,
people, there would be two camps and everyone in the middle. One camp would say you should never work with family, and the other should say, oh, there's no one better to work with than family. So how did you reconcile that dynamic in the band and even in the business as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the band was the period of time when you shouldn't work with family. So then the company was the period of time where you can. We came to blows in the band all the time, but we lived a lot of life during that time. And actually, I haven't shared this too much, but Tim and I had a pretty difficult time in our teenage years, and we had a lot of conflict and didn't get along. And I remember he asked me to start playing guitar for his band with Joe Cornelius, with the Cornelius group, which was called Strive. I always loved that. I can still picture the t-shirts, the yellow and black t-shirts. But yeah, he asked me to come play guitar for that band, and I said, why are you asking me to come play in your band? Like, I don't think you even like me. And he was like, well, that's why. Like, we haven't gotten along, and I want an opportunity to like get along. So he kind of olive branched that with the music. And then it was still tough, for the years doing the band. We had a lot of challenges. But then starting the business felt, fairly easy at that point.
Yeah. So you've been through a lot, you've learned a lot. Tell us, what are the things you tell others when it comes to navigating working smarter? What does that mean to you? How do you live that? How do you counsel others in that?
Well, I think what we were just talking about is probably the best place to start. If you are, knowing the difference between freelance work and building a company and being an entrepreneur, and that same thing back to some realistic expectations. And at a certain point, if you are a craftsman, if you have something that you love to do, that you love doing the work, you kind of have to realize that if you're successful, at some point, if you build a company around what you love to do, the work you love to do, at a certain point, you'll have to stop doing the work and you'll have to start running the company.
Yeah.
That's just the truth of it. Eventually, the cost of the expertise will go too high, where you're going to need to offload work to people who are not as skilled as you. And so the quality of the work's going to have to realistically come down. And so then the brand is going to have to be able to sustain that in some ways, right? Like, you're the high top end and you could deliver it to here, but in that transitional point where other people are doing it, you're going to have this kind of like, okay, what level of service are we really bringing here? And what, you know, what can we match to? And you're going to have to hand it off if you're going to grow as a company.
Yeah.
So if that's not of interest to you and you want to, then you might be a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to raise those prices as high as you can and make your bag. And so I think that's the biggest thing in entrepreneurship, is the difference between entrepreneurship and companies, and having a company that's working, and freelance work where you're doing the work. And I think Tim, in starting AGD, started us off from the first place. That was his question. Do you want to always be doing this work? And I was like, heck no. I want to do this right now. And then I want to train other people to do it. And then I want to move on to other things. So that's the thing too, is are you going to want to move on to other things? So self-awareness and clarity for the end game.
Yeah. Which is something in your business. It's something that you can do that is possible. Whereas the band, there's no way to do that with the band, right? The people are the band.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And outside of success, like, it's not something you can orchestrate or tinker. You got to get a big hit and you can live off the royalties, at that point. Now, honestly though, strategically, you can get strategic as an artist and go, I want that mailbox money. And you change the way that you're working to try and get revenue generating residuals. And that looks like working more towards TV and film placements, more targeted niche. And actually, my wife and I were just talking about this the other day. We were driving down the road and I said, it would be really great if people who wanted to be famous had the self-awareness to just say, I want to be famous. And if culturally we could break that down where that's not so shamed.
Just be explicit about your intentions.
Yeah, because if an artist comes in to me and they say, I want to make money making music, I'm like, cool, I can have that done for you in 6 months if you're any good. And then it's like, I want to make money making my music. Oh, and by the way, I'd really like to be famous. And I'm like, could we have started there? Like, if we can just start from I want to be famous, then I get to lay out, okay, here's why this is going to be so hard, and here's what you're going to have to do, and here's what's not going to be possible for you. On the flip side, if you really are an artist, a musician, and you really do want to make a living just from music, it's still hard, but it's not nearly as hard as being famous. So being targeted about that, being strategic about that, you can set yourself up where at some point in time you could work a little less and still be pulling decent revenue through strategic planning.
And I think the same thing goes for, when you mention that, like, I think of someone, is looking at being a freelancer or an entrepreneur or getting employment, you could go get a job and then just save and invest and be very wealthy that way, right? it's all
Totally.
about whatever context we're in, about knowing where we're going and then positioning the factors towards that aim.
Totally. People talk about, oh, I don't know what my career should be. Maybe you don't need one.
Yeah.
Like, go get a job.
Yeah.
Like, a job's not a career, and everybody doesn't need to have a career. Like, you could have a really good job and do some really good financial planning, and then guess what? Change jobs.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, you're bored? Cool. Change jobs. Build your life around how much money you make in a realistic and good way, and find that self-awareness and that happiness. You don't have to have a career, but that's a certain kind of person that can do a job and not find
Yeah.
identity in that, right?
Mhm.
Like, their identity is not tied to their job.
Yeah.
That's a certain type of person. If you need to be passionate about what you're working, if you can't compartmentalize, then you need a career. And if you're not in one, you need to go find one.
Yeah. So,
You know?
so how do you translate that to the personal? How do we unify the work we do with the personal lives we live? Obviously that's something we have to learn, and sometimes we have to learn the hard
Yeah.
way. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I think most importantly is stuff doesn't make anyone happy, right? Like, it's some stuff that we've just heard for so long, but like, and I struggle with as much as anybody else, is that like, success isn't going to make me happy, right? Like, stuff isn't going to make me happy. This is my life right now, and if I'm not happy in it right now, I'm not going to be happy in it when I achieve all the things that I've set out to do. So
In fact, it might make it worse.
it more than likely will make it
Yeah.
worse. And more than likely will make it worse, because you'll get there under duress. You'll probably
Yeah.
compromise some things that you wish you didn't compromise, and things like that. So I think, how do we separate it from the personal is to get really personal and find the things that make you happy. So what does make me happy is creating things and building things and working with people and stuff like this, conversations. So building my life in a way where I get to do that is
Living the
that
life you
is-
want to live today is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't like toys, right? Like, I don't like things, but other people do. So like, if you really like boat, like, you want a boat, and if you had a boat and you spent every weekend on your boat, and that is like, man, my life is so good. I work 9 to 5, and then every weekend I'm out on my boat.
Yeah.
Great. Then who cares about the 9 to 5? Don't change a thing. You found your happiness, and
It's a vehicle for your boating.
it's a vehicle for your boating, and that's what makes you happy. So just that self-awareness, I think, is huge. So I think, how does that hit with the personal is like just getting really personal and asking yourself if you're happy, and that's going to tap into stress management. I got sober about 2 years ago as a major component to my happiness, and I wasn't alcohol didn't get me into trouble. It just impeded my happiness. I was stressed all the time, and I was medicating.
Yeah.
So it was about getting personal. It's about looking at your life and going like, I have these habits, getting rid of bad habits.
So what's the intersection of you did that and now you're not? Someone might go, well, I want that, but I feel stuck between those two places. What would you say to them?
Yeah, clarity. And you might need help to find the clarity, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, you wake up one day. Maybe for some people it is. It might be therapy. Honestly, like, I'm a big proponent of talk therapy, but I've also done some EMDR therapy through my journey to sobriety, and channeling through my divorce and stuff like that. So it's just not, you can't separate and compartmentalize. Like, your life is your life. And so as far as entrepreneurship and working and all of that stuff, it's such a big part of our lives as entrepreneurs. It drives us, it motivates us, and it's fun and exciting, and it's what we want to be doing. Like I said, I never ever thought maybe I could go get a job. Like I didn't have that. So this is a part of me, but it has side effects the same as anything else. So high stress, high anxiety, imposter syndrome, low like challenges with friendships, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're constantly selling and creating partnerships and stuff like that, it's like, oh wait, you're just a friend. I'm not supposed to be selling you right now. So all those personal challenges that are side effects from being an entrepreneur or being a career-minded person, and it just takes getting clear on what those things are and then doing the work to make changes to your personal life. So it could be just a diet, it could just be changing your diet, like, or changing your sleep. Like I was in a career session earlier today. I've been doing these free career sessions for young aspiring music industry professionals. And she was saying how she never sleeps. I was like, dude, you're like, I don't know their age, but I'm like, you gotta sleep. It's important. So it just might be changing some habits, so I just don't think you can separate how to do the work better or how to work smarter. Honestly, the best way to work smarter is to change your bad habits, honestly.
Yeah. So I want to dive into, because you kind of illuminated a few things. Really, you're talking about the narrative that informs us and systems that help us. So when you think about narratives and systems, how do you see them? How do they affect you? How do they impact you? How do you use them?
Yeah, I love systems for other people. It's so weird. I'm really good at creating systems. I'm not good at working within them.
Yeah. You feel constrained by them? Would you say, or is it something else?
At a certain point, yeah. I think I build some natural systems. I build some routines. I like routines, and then very quickly when they stop serving me, I'm able to just move on from them or to break my own rules. And that can be confusing for people sometimes. So sometimes I need to remind myself that as far as my staff is concerned, I need to stay within my own systems, just as an example, even though it may not be impeding things, or I think it's not impeding things, but it might be. I don't know. That would be some self-awareness work there. But I'm very good at creating. Like I said, I can watch something happen, and I can mimic it. So in the same sense, I can articulate steps A through Z on how to get to a result.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good at that. And that's what our whole company is built off of. Is our artist development program is a task list of things that need to happen. So I love systems for that. But again, back to self-awareness, you need to determine whether or not you're good at whether systems serve you or not.
And how did narratives tie into that? Or how do narratives affect you?
Yeah, time, right? I think narratives hit your time the most, and stress and anxiety and depression are all things that we don't give enough credit to. How much time are you spending scrolling through Facebook or Instagram in a fog, right? And you're going, oh, I really need to stop this.
It's stealing our time, right?
It's stealing our time, and it's just numbing because you're overstressed, because you're overworked, and just changing those habits. So go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, what's the story we tell ourselves that gets us to do that?
Maybe it's that gets us to make the change, or gets us
to that gets us bad behavior, to be a zombie on social media, where it's not even it's just this mindless thing that's either an
Oh,
escape
I
or
think it's the lack of a narrative. It's the lack of
the lack
actually
of
telling.
purpose.
It's the lack of telling the story. Like
Okay.
it's the lack of exploration. Am I happy?
Yeah.
Right? Like, am I happy? Sorry, there's a printer going. Is that too loud
So
for you back there?
I don't hear it, so you're good.
Okay, cool.
But
So
is
am
that
I distracted? Am I easily
well,
distracted?
I think one thing that comes to mind is I need other people to tell me that I'm happy. Is that part of
Right.
it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I need validations. Yeah. Seeking validations. And honestly, like that's not so, like we say that with shame, right? Like we say that with a negative, like, oh, that person just needs validation. No, that person needs validation. Find a way to validate them.
Yeah.
Like not over and above,
Superficially.
like
Yeah.
not superficially, but let's be talking about how, and then like some people don't need validation, but maybe they need quality time, right? Like, or whatever. So
Well,
I
and
think
I
it's just
think,
about getting clear.
yeah, and I guess the other thing that I think a lot of what you say speaks to, and perhaps you could dive in deeper, is this idea of fake it till you make it, pretend, don't be real. When you're trying to say, perhaps we go the opposite direction. Is that what
Sure.
I'm hearing? What
Within your set, like, yeah. I think it's, well, also understanding that you can be real with yourself, but also, and the closer you are to being real with yourself, the easier it is to have a clear presentation of who and what you're doing to the public that doesn't have imposter syndrome tied to it, right? So fake it till you make it is a funny idea because that's necessary sometimes, right? Like, did I have the actual experience to start coaching artists right when I started my company? Maybe or maybe not, but there wasn't any way that I could get the experience if I didn't just get started. So there's definitely an amount of fake it till you make it and figure it out along the way. So I don't want to knock that.
Yeah.
That's fine. But have the self-awareness to know when you're faking it and let all of that kind of come up, and don't be lying to yourself, don't be lying to others, but present with confidence, and then bring the energy, the excitement, and the backbone and the accountability to say, I'm gonna take this contract, I'm gonna take this job, even though there's going to be some places where I might have to really learn on the fly, and I'm going to do that. And so I think the clearer you are with yourself and who you are gives you the ability to step into those spaces with confidence, knowing I'm shooting my shot here, and this is, maybe a bit outside of my scope, but I'm confident in myself that I can rise to the challenge. So the presentation out here to everybody else doesn't have to be the same as what's going on in here.
Although I think what you're also implying is that you're willing to do what it takes to fill those gaps, right?
You got to be, yeah.
And that's a difference I think worth distinguishing, because I don't know that everyone is.
That's true.
Yeah. So in other words, if you don't know this thing that you've promised, you're going to figure it out and deliver that, right?
Right. And if you can't do that, don't say you're gonna.
Yeah.
Right? And then that comes back to that self-awareness of like, do you like living that way? I like living that way.
Yeah.
I like learning new things on the fly and stretching myself and growing. That doesn't mean that's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
You could go and grow academically and not pursue things until you've really studied it top to bottom and tested out on it, that's, by 17, I was writing essays about how I'm not going to college. So that's obviously not the path I took, but that's a path. Yeah. It's a real path. So but
you didn't stop learning. You just
I never stopped learning.
You learned in a different way than the traditional structure.
The essay I wrote was an exercise in learning. How's this teacher going to react to this?
Yeah.
And I was testing that interaction. Okay. I'm going to do that. Cause I could have wrote an essay about how excited I was to go to college and get an A.
Yeah.
But, I could have done that. I chose to learn something by testing the teacher and pushing some
Yeah.
limits and see, so it was learning.
Yeah.
in
It,
my
it
own-
reminds me
my
of
own way.
I once wrote an essay in 10th grade about my family history, but I made it all up.
Yeah.
And my dad found out and he's like, well, you need to tell her. So I had to go confess, and then I had to write another
Oh,
one.
that's
But
awesome.
I learned a lot in that process. So that was
Oh, that's
interesting.
great. And then what do you discover through that? You discover, hey, maybe I'm a creative writer, or I
Yeah.
have some ability to do some stuff that I didn't
Yeah.
know I had. So I think the big takeaway that I have in the working smarter and like that self-awareness and stuff is, and to that point, is just like, yeah, knowing yourself and knowing your limits, knowing if you like to push your limits.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You don't have
Yeah.
to be a person that pushes your limits, honestly. Like, and maybe
if we all did that, we might have too much instability.
Yeah, and I think we're dealing with that right now. I
Yeah.
think we have a hustle culture, right? We have people who are, we have a lack of employment right now in a lot of spaces. We have a lot of gig economy, people freelancing,
Yeah.
and it's exciting. But do they know the long term? Do they know like, oh, this is it forever? Like, as soon as you stop hustling, you stop eating. And that's not something like that becomes a fear, right? So people start like, oh, I have this, I can do social media management. So they start hustling and getting some clients where they manage like 3 or 4 social media accounts. And then one drops off and they're like, oh, I got to go find another one. So they go find another one. And after 3 or 4 years of that, they're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted trying to find the next client. And you go, hey, what if you could go work for like an agency?
Yeah.
And giving that permission. And so, kind of bringing it full circle, I never for the life of me thought that I could go get a job, but I wish I had somebody in my life to tell me that.
Yeah.
I wish there was somebody in my life that maybe would have opened that up of being like, well, have you considered finding somebody that would be able to use your skill set and expertise, that you would be a valuable part of their team? I don't know if I would have done it, but I didn't. It literally was not in my brain as even an option, and it should have been.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I think about a year ago, I found an old letter from probably like 12, 13 years ago, from my second cousin. He was here in Atlanta when I moved here, and he wrote a letter that was exactly what you said. He said, Jason, I want to give you some advice. I didn't even remember that he wrote the letter.
Yeah, you're like,
but I read it and I was like, wow, you gave me some really good advice, and I completely ignored it.
and probably ended up taking some of it a little bit down the road, I think, but that was me. And so I hope in my role now, as I'm, moving into, having run a company for a while and had some life experience, that's what I'm hoping to instill in people is there's, if you're clear about your goals, then there's probably some necessary things that you're going to have to do to get there. And there's probably a path that's like, oh, here's where you're going to have these challenges. If you're not clear about your goals, that's okay too, but don't start trying to carve out a path towards one of them. Just be okay in the ambiguity for the time that you're in the ambiguity, and make good decisions about your future as best you can at that time. And what that looks like is not getting into debt, not over extending yourself trying to find your path when you don't know the things that make you happy, and getting some work done on self. Maybe your path hasn't shown up yet because your brain is too consumed with whatever might be going on in your life, and that might be outside of your control, right? And let that be okay. Like, maybe you got dealt a bad hand, and take a minute to let that be okay. And then start to say, okay, I've acknowledged that I was dealt a bad hand, but I'm not gonna accept being in this place forever, and start getting clear on where you want to be. So the ambiguity, I think we're told that we're not supposed to be in that ambiguity. I was definitely messaged that if I didn't know what was next, something was wrong. And I'm trying to change a bit of that in my life and in my community. Is like, if you don't know, that's fine.
Well, isn't it ironic that when we're young, that ambiguity is exciting, but as we get older, it turns to anxiety?
Yeah, but I had it young.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The ambiguity scared me.
Got it.
From day one. If I didn't know where I was headed and where I was going, or at least presenting that, I had a lot of self-imposed pressure. I don't know where else it came from, but I'm sure there were other contributing factors, but I had a lot of pressure to know what I was doing. Probably from being so stubborn, saying I wasn't going to college, right? Like,
so I better have an answer.
Yeah, if you're not going to go to college, you better have a plan. So probably
that is interesting, because there's a safety in just following society's tracks, the trains that are going to different places. So
and so, you know, I'm like, and the problem with that right now, and I think we're all kind of talking about this, is that society's track is really freaking expensive.
And it's going in circles and in weird places.
And it's going in circles. So the track is broken.
Yeah.
The track is broken right now. And that's where I'm saying, like, listen, $15 an hour or $20 an hour somewhere, you know, making a living wage, living with a bunch of friends in an apartment and having no clue what's happening in your future is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be what we've got to do. And we got to be willing to humble ourselves, and that's not always easy.
Yeah, for a period of time, and then something will enlighten you. You know.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first started freelancing, there was a lady at our church that said a business needed help moving boxes. It was something like that, and I had some days where I didn't have any paid work, so I went and did it. Turned out she needed a website, and she hired me at my full rate to do that. And I would have never done that if I hadn't been willing to go work, you know, for that $15 an hour. So
that's right. And opportunity, experience, learning is everywhere. Right. So I think that's the big thing for me right now.
So what are your final words of wisdom? Anything you want to share that we didn't get to?
Man, final words, wisdom. I think really where we were just at is what's been on my mind a lot is I do believe the track is broken. And I think that our mentors don't even know the answers, like where you're turning for guidance. You know, just look behind their eyes and just ask yourself if they really believe it.
That's been eye-opening for me. Like, people I really trusted and admired, and they don't have an answer. They don't know what to do, or they're wrong in some very obvious ways. So,
and so, you know, those are good questions when finding a mentor. Like, what have you been wrong about? Right. So maybe that. What mistakes did you make that you learned from, and just being cautious to find people who can't answer that. Right. So but the track is broken. There needs to be, our company is working on some new paths for education and training to work in the music business, because I think the track's broken. So that's my big thing, is like, if anybody's telling you, just use your gut, read your gut, and like, be cautious with your spending and your debt. I mean, that's just the biggest thing. Don't, you know, I went into tens of thousands of dollars of debt to try and break the band and make the band successful. And I don't regret a penny of that, because I knew every bit of it, how hard we were working, and
that was your college tuition.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I don't regret that, but I hope that everybody else can say the same. And that's not the story that I'm hearing from people that are like, I spent this much on, you know, higher education without the clarity
Yep.
to go. So I don't have the answers for that, but I just have that cautionary tale of just like, if you're paying to go to school or whatever, just really know what you're hoping to get out of that and be happy with the results no matter what. Like,
Yeah.
if there's
And
a hopefully
count the
tied to
cost
that,
before you make
the
the decision.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe, for people, for the audience listening, also just don't, if it didn't go the way that you wanted it to go, don't think that you need to make it worth it somehow.
To
Right?
vindicate
Like,
yourself.
don't try to vindicate yourself. Just get started on what's next,
Yeah.
like
It's a stepping stone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone, it's a learning, and take it for what it is. But don't spend a minute of time trying to validate yourself in something that can't be validated.
Yeah. So how can people connect with you, your business? Tell us where to go.
What I'm most excited about right now, and when you reached out to have me on here, I was like, oh, this is great. I love it. I'm so excited to be launching the side program. So we've been doing artist development for 10 years, and just about, it's like eight years. I've been doing it about 10, but so we've been doing artist development for so long. My new journey is starting some professional development. So we'll be training music industry professionals in our program with a new certificate program. So I'm very excited about that. Honestly, the best way to connect with me for that is Facebook.
Okay.
Nathan Dohse on Facebook, and to just shoot me a message, or Instagram. I'm on Instagram, and shoot me a message, and we're just doing meeting with people and seeing who's thinking maybe I want to be in the music business. And
And
my
so
big thing
who are the people that you can provide the most value to?
Well, we've been putting out some content. It's been cool to see how it reacts. People that I'm like, hey, are you really good at researching? Guess what? You'd probably crush it in the music business. You know what I mean? Like, are you good at email and communication? Like, people think the music business has this really high barrier to entry, and it's not. Like, some basic soft skills and love for music is about all you need. And then work ethic and drive, because it's not easy to break in. The work's not hard, it's just not easy to break in. So if you come to the table ready to, get the work done and crush, it's easy to get noticed for being a hard worker.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah. So it's really anybody, in my opinion. And having some transitional, the big conversation for me is like, hey, get that job that just pays the bills, that you're not tied to, clock in, clock out, and find a trade that you're passionate about, and start working towards working in that. And maybe that's a part-time thing, and you're working your day job and doing it part-time. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it works, but yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your life with us today.
But man, just a lot of fun, and to get some of those thoughts out, and hopefully they help some people and inspire some people.
Awesome. Thanks.